Hello, welcome to this first workshop that we at Science is Weird, me, Brandon Hendrickson, are putting on to understand Kieran Egan's one giant idea. Just to give you kind of a promo preview of what's about to happen, I'm going to give a riddle. In fact, honestly, let me give the riddle right this second. If you actually would like to write this down on a piece of paper, it might help you remember some of the things that we're going to be talking about. But the riddle that we will spend the next hour trying to solve together is nothing more or less than the following. Why is good education so hard? Everybody has opinions on this, and we want to hear yours. By the end of this, you may understand some subtle and important and beautiful and powerful new answer to that question. I am not going to just be delivering you the answer. I am going to be sprinkling in metaphors and clues and illustrations and weird stories, binaries, and I'm going to be helping you guys figure this out. I will be turning the chat on from time to time and giving you guys not very long, usually about 20, 30 seconds just to shoot out guesses for these things. So I'm going to think about this right now. And I'm going to give you a chance to try to answer that or proffer up your own answer to that in just a couple of minutes. First, it's 2009, and I am stepping off of an elevator in the Suzzallo Library at the University of Washington. The lights are flickering, everything is dim, and things are kind of feel dank. That's not possible because it's an academic library, but in my soul, I remember this feeling dank. And as I walk in there, I feel like there's a 5 to 10% chance that this particular floor of the library is haunted. It's just that sort of place. I am there because I'm in graduate school, and I'm in graduate school because I have been obsessed for the last last few years, as of 2009, with the question of how do we make good education? What is a good education composed of? And I'm beginning to get worried because I realize that my classes barely touch on that question if they have anything to do with it at all. It seems like in the program in which I've enrolled, we are interested in talking about all of the sort of outside aspects of what is the role of school and society, and all the internal aspects of who are the kids that we are working with. And then a lot of the nuts and bolts, the tiny pieces. But hardly anywhere in my education as an educational leader is there addressed what is the purpose of education? What are we trying to do here? And how can we make education as wonderful as we all know it can be? I know by this point in my life, in 2009, that education can be truly wonderful because I have tasted that sweet nectar. When I grew up, I had loved learning. I was never to be found without a book. And I liked my elementary and middle and high school, and I loved my undergraduate education, where I just followed the age-old dictum of take whatever classes seem shiniest to you, and I loved almost everything that I learned. And I may have graduated with 2 degrees, religious studies and history, and what does one even do with those degrees? But dagnabbit, I actually understood a lot of the world from that degree, and I loved it. And now I'm in graduate school, and we're not talking about the big things. And honestly, I'm beginning to understand that most of the people who are in my classes, and many of the people who are teaching my classes, have never even experienced the joy of a thick, rich, wonderful education. And I'm beginning to get scared. So I had to find some book for my History of American Education class. I need to find some sort of book, and I'm looking for the book, and I can't find the book, and I can't find the book, and I can't find the book, and then I spot it. But as I go to reach for it, my eye catches on the side, and I see the title of a book that is a really interesting title. Getting It Wrong from the Beginning. It's by somebody named Kieran Egan, and I stopped from picking the book that I was supposed to get, that I was there to get. And instead, I grab this and I start leafing through it. And over the next half an hour, over the rest of the evening, over the next few weeks, it begins to dawn on me that my life is never going to be the same. I realize that maybe I'm assuming something that I shouldn't be assuming. I'm assuming that it is hard to get a good education. I feel like in conversations about education, there are two sorts of conversations that go on. I was about to say two kinds of people, but I think maybe two kinds of conversation is more correct with that. There are conversations where we say, you know what, like schools like are pretty much as good as we have any right to get, and we should be happy with that and try to, improve things a little bit. And the other perspective, the other conversation is like, oh my gosh, these schools, people are not learning things in these schools. So I want to ask you, from 0 schools, what are they? To 10, which is schools are fantastic. Where would you say you put yourself? Not necessarily for your own experience, but, for the experience of people in general. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the chat, and I'm going to let you I'm going to give you 10 seconds from when I open that up, just to give you the chance to type in one single one-digit number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, or 10. 10 is not technically a one-digit number, but let's just kind of grandfather it in. Just go ahead and do that. I'm curious to see how our spread is here. Turn the chat on. Get ready for it. You have 10 seconds. Go! Schools, to yes. Yum. 3, 2, 1, and I think the highest number that we see here is an 8, and the next highest number is a 6. Probably the median is a 3, I'd guess. Maybe it's a 4. Okay, so I was about to say that I'm not going to try to talk you out of whatever number that you chose, but maybe actually I want to try to do that for just a second. It turns out there's been a lot of, I have a picture here, none other than Kieran Egan, author of the book that I had found, who changed my life, who died last May. This entire workshop is in memoriam of him. So Howard Gardner, you might know him from multiple intelligence theory, which is like 98% bunk, nonsense, garbage. He's admitted as much. But he has another book called The Unschooled Mind that looks into how much are the kids actually learning in school? Not just like recitation of facts, but like actual understanding. And it's a good book, and I recommend it, especially some of the middle chapters. And one of the things that he shows is some studies that goes through people who have actually taken college courses in biology, in physics, and chemistry, and asks them really basic questions in those topics. Now, when you ask the questions in the way that, they're given on tests, they do great, they do fantastic. And I need to say, it's not just like any random college students who have taken classes in this. The people who went to an Ivy League, I think it was Ivy League universities, but people who graduated with honors, even from their classes or from high school. I forget the details of this. But people who've proven themselves to be really, really, really good at these topics. And when you look at this, when you give them the questions that look just like the ones that they had on tests, they usually do very well. But then whenever you change the context, you give it to them in a kind of computer game, you give it to them just kind of asking it in a weird, fresh way, they do terribly. Most of them do about as well as they would have when they were school children. They're using their intuitive science, their intuitive physics, their intuitive biology, their intuitive chemistry. And it's like their minds, even though they've gone through all of these levels of education, are totally unschooled. They do not bear the imprint of having been in school in any positive way. Even more feistily is some research that's been not done but compiled by the libertarian author Brian Kaplan. This book, I recommend both of these books. This book is the larger picture of it is how schooling fits into the economy. It's not the case against education, it's the case against schooling. But as part of it, he needs to demonstrate that people don't learn very much. And so he got this data. So take a look at this. Adult science knowledge, some telling questions. Okay, the center of the Earth is very hot. First of all, is that true or false? Okay, you probably know the answer right now. And in fact, let me take this and move this. True is the right answer. You can tell that because it's italicized right there. And In fact, oops, there we go. 81% of people got that right, which seems fantastic until you remember that it's a true-false test. So of the people who got it right, there's a certain way of doing the math on this that you can figure out like how many of them actually knew it probably and didn't just guess it right because there were only two options in this. So only about 3 out of 4 people, adults, from the General Social Survey, which is a big thing in the United States, knew that the center of the Earth is very hot. That's a very low number. The continents of which we have been moving, let me even just do another one. Does the Earth go around the sun or does the sun go around the Earth? Okay, you know the answer to that question. So let me just peel back. What do you think the number is going to be for the number of people who effectively could demonstrate that they know this? According to the General Survey, only a bit more than half. Is this true? It turns out that it matches a lot of other data that we can find when asking people basic science questions. Electrons are smaller than atoms. They are, it's true. Less than a third of Americans, at the very least, got that. Lasers work by focusing sound waves. The universe began, you can get into some sort of religious sort of like other worldviews, other ways of sort of telling the story. So maybe that one is more complicated. The cloning, ordinary tomatoes do not contain genes while genetically modified tomatoes do. Is that true or false? The answer is totally false. Genes are in everything. But again, only about a quarter, a third of people actually knew that tomatoes have genes naturally. When you hear about the debate between around genetically modified foods in the future, just remember that like whatever surveys you're hearing, very few of the respondents know that tomatoes have genes. Okay, so my hope in just sharing some of this has been to like, if you were, above a 5 on that earlier question, that you felt like, schools are doing pretty good for most people, like, rethink that. But, like we could define pretty good in a bunch of different ways. What all parties in this debate agree on is that schooling gets the population to be basically literate and basically numerate. It is a really interesting thing when you look at actual rates of being able to read complex texts. Being able to read like a jury notice or something like that. Very few people are able to do that in most modern Western societies. So it gets worse than that. But, why am I saying all this? Sorry, ADHD moment. So this was my obsession, was trying to figure out when people get not just mildly okay educations, but really great educations, when they fall in love with the world, where they want to keep learning, where they do keep learning, when they understand a really thick, rich, deep understanding of the understanding, when they understand the world deeply and thickly and richly. This was my question. So fast forward to the present day, I now run Science is Weird, and we have built Science is Weird on the backbone of Kieran Egan's ideas. I should actually just do a thing where I probably say, we are in the process right now. If you go to sciencesweird.com, if you go to our science classes and you scroll down to see the next 6 years, we are in the process right now of reinventing the 3rd through 10th grade science curriculum. This is the project that we're doing. We're banking that the one beautiful idea of that Kieran Egan had is powerful enough to actually achieve this total rebuilding of the science curriculum. But it can do a heck of a lot more beside. If you've taken any of our classes before, you have probably recognized the fact that every single one of our lessons rhymes with each other. Every one of our lessons is a riddle wrapped in a game. We sprinkle in metaphors and stories and mental images and role-playings and nonsense. And by the end, you achieve this, well, hopefully, right, fingers crossed, everyone achieves this sort of deep insight that upends how they see some portion of the world. All of that is from Egan. But that's not Egan's big idea. That's like the surface part of it. That is like the tip of the iceberg. I have spent the last 10 years telling no one about Kieran Egan's big idea. Because for a few years, I tried so hard, and I failed 100% of the time. I could just get to that moment. It would be like a game for me. Like, how long can I talk until I begin to see eyes glazed over? It's not that I couldn't talk for a long time. I know I can talk for a long time. It's like, how far could I talk about unpacking Egan's idea in this brilliant, beautiful way? Always trying these like new routes into like explaining the idea, and it never worked. I explained his idea to exactly 0 people. This workshop series is my attempt to convey what I think is the only deep hope that we have for moving schools forward. That I think is the most beautiful idea that anyone has ever had concerning education. So let's get started in this, shall we? Here's what I want to do. I want to share my screen again, and I want to go back to this question of why is education so hard. I'm going to give you 4 clues for this. If you're playing along with our game at home, that is not the right color. Go ahead and write these down, or not. It's fine. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Clue number 1. Come together, which we will draw as this. Clue number 2. Rise up. Clue number 3, break apart. Sorry, break away. And clue number 4, one sad triangle. Okay, feel free to play with these. These will all make sense by the end. Feel free to totally ignore these. In fact, honestly, I don't know. Maybe it's better if you do right now. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to throw into the chat your best thought as to, just as simply as possible, why is good education so hard? And go for it. People are different. Things are different for everyone. Because it would be a tremendous amount of work to make things engaging. People have to want to learn in order to learn. There's so many different needs that must be met. Need connection, budgets, training, info coming from many directions. Good for one isn't good for all. Teachers' time, mindset of curiosity, continuous learning, too many philosophies. Too many cooks spoils the broth. Everyone comes in from different circumstances. Overcoming burnout from old ways of education take time. Too often put ownership of our education on someone else. No clear end goal. I'll give 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We value busy work too much, lack of purpose for education. What I'd love to do at this point in the workshop is to say, imagine a villain for education. Imagine like whatever the answer you just put in was. Personify that. What is the villain? I'm not going to give a chance to talk about that because we wouldn't need to get on with this. But right now, just think about a villain. Egan is going to name a villain. He's going to suggest an actual, this is the baddie here. This is the cause. Have it in mind. Have your villain in mind so you can compare it at the end of this. I'm going to give a hint right now. I'm going to give a question right now, actually. What job do we give schools? imagine that, schools are an institution of our society, blah, 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 and we task them with certain jobs, and we, reward the people in them insofar as they follow the job of the school. What is the job of the school? 30 seconds. Go for it. Teach, babysitting, teaching conformity, babysitter, creative, productive members of society, make kids compliant, that I read that one already, learners for life, turn out children so they can contribute, so who can contribute to society, probably economically, picking basic skills and information, daycare, obedience, self-actualization, memorizing sets and, should be self-actualization, instead it's memorizing sets and processes, minimum standard, basic skills in childcare. I'm checking right now to see, is it like one person who keeps saying babysitting or childcare? Nope, that's every one of those is a unique person. Okay. It should be to help guide education of the student, but they're prescribing and oversimplifying what the student learns. 3, 2, 1, and okay. To answer this, even to really begin to understand the potential answers for this, I want you to imagine that you are a little robot. I guess you're made out of Legos too. I'm only realizing that right now as I look at this picture. I want you to imagine that you are a robot made by space alien educators who saw, this species of ape developing on the plains of Africa, and they sent you to this planet to float on a balloon and just float in the atmosphere for 100,000 years. And watch to see this emerging ape. What kind of education does it have? What is the job that it gives to education? You wait 100,000 years. You have the ability to hear all sorts of things. You can zoom in with your camera. Let's just imagine those are cameras and not guns. And one of them is a boom mic or something like that. And you are paying attention. You are spying on the sort of evolving, unfolding humanity before you. And then your timer goes ding. The 100,000 years is up, and you begin to compile your report that you are going to text intergalactically back or whatever to the aliens. And the way that you begin your report is, on Earth, humans have there are 3 chapters in the story of human education. The first chapter is, and then you explode in a storm of confetti because an F-22 Raptor has spotted you somewhere over Lake Huron, and a scared American and Canadian government combined has rushed in to blow you up, and you never get to send your text. My question is, what would the 3 chapters of education be? Let me sketch out what Kieran Egan suggests that they are. Chapter 1, the first thing that you see, for the first 98,000 years that you're on Earth, you see humans, and these humans have a problem, and that problem is that things keep eating them. The trouble is that Mother Nature loves them because they are delicious. And this race of apes, they have no real, I don't want to say they have no skills. They have no claws. They have no interesting teeth. They can't fly. They don't have venom. They don't have armor. They are weak and they are pathetic. And the only way that they are able to survive is by becoming a unit, is by pressing themselves together, is by taking every new member of their society and squeezing into them all of the values and the knowledge and the traditions and the worldviews of their whole society. By making every individual every individual ape into like an ant for the larger hive, they are able to actually share so much in common that they can work together and they can behave like this distributed organism. And because of that, you see them slowly begin to take over the world. I want to draw a picture. At the top, if you're drawing along at home, go ahead and write down, don't do that. Story of education. This is the big story, the big history of education. This is not what you learn if you are in graduate school studying history of education. I can say that from experience. At least I didn't. I'm going to put 3 chapters in here. Here's 1, here's 2, and here's, 3. That's pretty good. Yeah, good, okay. Chapter 2. You're watching, and you are watching specifically in this place of, let's just say, emerging interest. Not 100,000 years ago, but about 2,000 years ago. You're watching ancient Greece, you're watching specifically the city of Athens, and there is this one person there who is angry. He's angry that he is living in a society where people have merged together. They have succeeded at becoming a unit. They have succeeded in passing along the wisdom of the ages. They have succeeded in making everyone know what their own specific role is inside of the society. They have pressed the society inside of each individual. And what he wants to do is walk around screaming, "Wake up, sheeple." His name is Plato, and he has this new idea for how to fix the sick, slothful, stupid society that he saw around him. And that was to learn what's true, to step above all of the traditions that have been passed down, to step beyond the local provincial understandings, to recognize that the human mind is capable of understanding the ultimate things. And when we teach the young these ultimate things, the true, the beautiful, the good, then they will not be able to do anything except for destroy this old society. They will invent a new society, a beautiful society in which they can live. Plato says, down with the old, in with the new, and threatens to throw a bomb in society to remake society. I'm going to put dates in here. Here we have, about 100,000 years ago. I'm going to put this chapter 2 at about 2,000 years ago. And then our final chapter that you see floating in the blue comes not 100,000, not 2,000, but about 200 years ago. 1762, I think. You're watching France, you're watching Paris, you're watching the philosophe Jean-Jacques Rousseau. If anyone here speaks French, I know a lot of our viewers do, I am sorry for butchering your beautiful language. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is writing a book called Émile. Émile is his book that explains how education should really be done. Because Jean-Jacques Rousseau is an angry man. He's angry because he looks around him and he sees these schools that he went to, the schools that all of the learned men of Europe have gone to, that are based on the school that Plato opened. And he said, these are factories of misery. These schools that we have invented, they are good for nothing except for making people stupid. People are having these supposedly beautiful, great ideas squeezed into their heads, and they are getting almost nothing from them. He cites his 100 years earlier French writer Montaigne, who says, that schools are good for nothing but producing asses loaded with books, donkeys with books on their backs. The whole idea was to transform humanity, but that's totally failed. But Rousseau has a different way, has a better way. What Rousseau writes in his book Emile, a book that is going to get him banned from France and banned from his birthplace of Geneva, that is going to get him denounced by archbishops, that is going to have a price set on his head. His book, Emile, says that the proper kind of education should not come from pressing these supposedly beautiful ideas into people's heads, but rather to develop the beautiful way that each individual has of understanding the world. To work one-on-one, respond to kids, respond to the child, and help them, give them, teach them the things that they know, that they need in order to sort of unspool the beautiful parts of themselves. How can we put this briefly for this? What Egan does is say that we can think of the goal of education as being 3 chapters. One of them we can call socialization. The next we can call academics. And the final one we can call development. These words aren't perfect. They're stand-ins for these 3 ways of thinking about education. We can think of them kind of neatly. Socialization is when you take the whole of society and try to cram it into the child. Actually, excuse me, what I mean by this specific spatial metaphor, which I think I can make a lot neater there. Do this, and do this. There we go. Is that we take kids and we make them more similar to each other. We take kids and we make them the way that they need to be to serve the society. In academics, we try to take kids and lift them up by transforming them by the best that has been thought and said. And by development, we mean taking kids, these quirky, weird kids, and helping them become more their authentic selves than they otherwise would be able to be. I guess I want to ask, what job do we give to schools? 30 seconds. Go for it. That was all to help sort of answer that question. Compliance, the first 2, socialization and academics. Socialization, first 2, 1 and 2, create future producers. Future producers would be probably understood as the first of those, socialization, because we need to have things produced, right? Like coffee mugs and things of that nature. And so we want to make individuals fit into these, sort of become cogs for society. Academics should be all 3, 1 and 2. Socialization and some academics. 3, 2, 1, and I want to play a little game. Actually, first, what I want to do is I want to suggest an answer. I'll give you some Mad Libs. You know Mad Libs, the kid thing where you get like blank sentences and you got to fill in like nouns and verbs. This is kind of like that. Probably not as fun. We give schools blank, colon, blank, comma, they're blank, but blank they're, oops, blank. Think about that. Let's do a game. Remember, think back to some schooling that you've had. In what ways in schooling have you seen the socialization job of school? Give me 30 seconds. Go for it. I'll just show you some pictures of schools just to kind of think about that. In what ways do schools make kids more the same, make kids try to fit into society? Limited choice of subjects, rules, uniforms. Teach at one level. Lines, like standing in line. Procedures divides them by ages, sometimes subdividing by ability, staying quiet, punishments, refusing to see differences, grading, right, the word grading was a factory word before it was a school word. I'm not positive on that. I think that might be true. Might not be true. Groups, charts, restraints. Children are harsh on nonconformists themselves, separating by ages. Teaching standard writing. Yeah, that's very good. Teaching math procedures rather than wise. Standards, color charts, only one way to complete assignments. 5, 4, 2, 1. I think all of those are really fantastic. You could also add into that, if you have, I'm an American, and if, none of these, I think, had American flags in them, but growing up in elementary school, we'd stand up every morning and we'd pledge allegiance to the flag. We would pledge our allegiance to the government, right? Which, like from a philosophical perspective seems like creepy or whatever, and I'm not actually saying that I'm opposed to it. I have complicated views on things. But that would be one way in which you're trying to make them a part of the society. Learning any the patriotic history of your society, so you will fight for it, so you will want to support it, want to continue it. Going to a local city of government, center of government, right? Like seeing your local city hall, and this is where the firefighters work, and things like that could also be probably you're becoming part of your society. In a socialized, that's not exactly the right word there. In a school that focuses on socialization, the teacher is understood to be the role model of the class. They embody especially the moral values that everybody else is supposed to have. I was sharing some of these ideas with some friends last night, and they said, the fact that you have to raise your hand to go to the bathroom seems like a really big aspect of sit down, shut up, you do what the authority figure says, right? This is not the way that humans naturally are. This is the sort of human that we've created. Some of the educational reformers, the radical educational reformers of the 60s had a field day just mocking this. And there's something to those to that. Okay. In what ways do you see the academic job for schools? Or not just see, do you remember the academic job being fulfilled by schools? Tests? Yeah. The fact that you're testing and trying to get people to learn things. Think about what kinds of things you're learning in school. Some of these things are as hard to see as it is for a fish to understand that it is in water, right? We're just so used to these ideas. Memorizing to get the things inside of your head. They almost exclusively teach theory, not practical skills. Nice one, Lois. Practical skills would probably be understood as a socialization thing, although you could understand it maybe as the third thing too. Teaching to the test. Yeah, because the test has been identified as having the highest knowledge, the most true knowledge. One size fits all. Yeah, very much so. Lectures, yes, yeah. Because in an academically oriented school, the teacher is not understood as the moral exemplar. I mean, they might be that too, but primarily they are the expert, right? Why would the kids talk? The teacher should talk more. Where do you get the true information from? Workbooks, worksheets, homework. Great man model of history, small select groups of great works. Definitely the second of those. I actually feel like the great man model of history might be more the socialization one of that. Or might be orthogonal to all of this. I'd have to think about that. That's good though, thank you. Curriculum has the answers, don't look for real knowledge. Or the curriculum has the real knowledge, right? In fact, the fact that we have a curriculum, in the sense of a set of things to learn, that's a big thing of this. Outdated boxed curriculum, yeah, right, because the truest, most importantest things probably don't change all that often, although there's some diversity inside of the academic perspective. 3, 2, 1, and I think we could add to this, why do people study calculus? Right? Calculus is, I know, you say it's not useful, then everyone wants to jump in like, oh, it's all these 20 times in my life I've used calculus. Okay, if you're that person, go, leave. You're not welcome here. Just kidding, you're wonderful. We teach algebra, we teach calculus, we teach geometry. Geometry was part of Plato's school, right? Famously, and probably not historically accurately, his academy, and I want to point out the fact that Plato's literal school that he founded, which happened to be in a grove of either olive trees or sycamore trees that was named after some obscure Greek hero named Academus. His academy has become the name, or it has become the word academy. Whenever you see a school that talks about academics or calls itself an academy, it is trying to ape Plato's original school. But famously and probably historically inaccurately, on the door to the school, it said, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here." Now this is weird, because the kind of geometry that they're talking about is not like useful geometry to be able to build things. The kind of geometry that they're working on is totally pointless geometry that is supposed to teach you the beauty of abstract forms. Why do we have kids do proofs? Well, you can like try to say, oh, it helps train your brain or whatever. Yeah, probably some video games are probably better at that, right? Proofs are not very helpful at training people to use their brains very well. Why do we have kids learn literature? And not just like, like any like old Stephen King novel or, whatever pot boiler that is on the shelves of Walmart, but rather like the greatest things that have been thought and said, The Great Gatsby, right? Moby Dick, whatever you're thinking of there, Maya Angelou. We think that there are these big ideas that it would be great if kids learned. If any of the politics of this, if this seems too conservative for you, just switch out these authors or these ideas with like your own preferred ideas of the kind of school that you think like could be transformational to society because it would actually teach kids things that are right. Communists did in Latin America and in the Soviet Union did a fantastic job of sort of like reimagining Plato's curriculum with their Marxist understanding of history at the core of what kids should learn so it would transform them. Finally, nobody said the third one, the self-actualization. Self-actualization, the developmental ideal. Where do you see the developmental ideal in schools? I'm going to choose this picture as the best one for this because it's probably the most helpful. But it's not just in this one classroom. The arts. Extracurriculars, yeah, the fact that you can choose what you want to study so you can choose who you want to be. Recess, yes, absolutely. Extracurricular stuff for kids to really enjoy things. Project-based learning. Project-based learning, I was talking to some friends about this. They suggested they're very big into project-based learning and unit studies too, because one, the things that you're studying are more interesting, and two, kids can find their own ways into the subjects for each of those units, each of those topics, each of those projects. Also, you're doing kind of hands-on things. You're bringing in the whole learner. All of our talk about brain-based education is straight out of Rousseau. Rousseau was all about becoming the Isaac Newton of the human mind, of the developing human mind. Once we understand how human minds actually work, then and only then will we be able to really teach kids and help them become these fully functioning people. Any kind of differentiated curriculum, any kind of push to help kids enjoy what they're doing and find more meaning in what they were doing. Hands-on activities, field trips, depending on where the field trips are, right? Because you could have a field trip that like goes to, you could have like an academically focused field trip where like you go to see like the local judge and like you're scared, into not becoming a criminal, right? That would be a socialization thing. But yeah, I think oftentimes field trips would be that. Robotics, actually, I feel like, yeah, actually in the current situation would be. Group collaboration projects. Whenever you see desks pushed together, right? Like, so you have kids working, like making sense of things together. That is absolutely a straight up Rousseau thing. In American public school history, John Dewey and Jean Piaget, if you know anything about educational history, educational theory, it seems mean to say that they're just warmed over Rousseau, because they really are so much more than that. How about this? Do you see anywhere in this classroom students being beaten for not knowing the information? This is one of Rousseau's greatest accomplishments, is to point out that that is terrible, which was common in the academic schools before him. In some ways, this is, if a teacher in the socialization is a moral exemplar, and in the academics is an expert, and here the teacher is a guide who helps the kids kind of understand themselves. Okay, fun game, great, great. Anyone want to take a guess as to what at least Egan thinks, and I think he's totally right, the first two blanks are in this? Why is good education so hard? We give school blank blanks. I'll give a hint. There's a... And there's a... Yeah. So the way that Egan sees it is that we give schools 3 separate jobs. Let's just get all fighty. Which one is the correct job? If you had to only pick one, the socialization, the academics, or the developmental goals, which one do you go with? And note that socialization here does not mean like getting kids to talk to one another, but like it means squeezing the society into the individual. Academics and development. These are the codes for that. Number 3, number 2. I'll point out that nobody, I think, is saying socialization for this. I'm going to, oh, that's interesting. When young socialize, when a middle school academics and high school development. That's very interesting. I think a helpful way of understanding all of this is just to think, what is the center of the solar system? I mean, we call it the solar system, right? It's the sun with the actual one. But you can think about this as what these 3 are disagreeing about. Here's a quasi-cartoon sun, and then around it, do this. Spins, some planets or something. Try a planet here. So the idea would be that for socialization, well, here, let me do this. Socialization, academic, and development. What is the center of education for each of these things? Let me even just give sort of my... I am not happy with academic being straddling these two. Nope, I am not. I'm going to break one of my rules. I'm going to try to split this into 2 different pages there. Okay. Whew. Oh, sorry, it just makes me feel so much better. Well, the way that I'm thinking about this, for the first type of education, the center of school is the society. How else can you make the society run if you don't have the society at the center? Schools are these organs of the society, maybe not of the government directly, but of the society, right? Of the community. It takes more than one person to make a school. And so you have to serve that. Otherwise the game cannot continue to be played. For academics, the center is content. What are the greatest ideas that will transform people? And for developmental, the center of education is the child. Has to be the child. I want to note that this actually neatly explains a lot of the fights that have occurred over the 20th century, the educational wars. The educational traditionalists would be this, the educational progressivists would be over here. Both of them have kind of grabbed onto pieces of the society, one of it, so they can fight each other better. It's oftentimes hard to have a fight between three equal people. Oftentimes, whatever the weakest one is, and is getting gobbled up and kind of split in two by the other two parties. This is what happens right in American electoral politics. It's hard to have a third party, and it's hard to have a third dog in this fight, right? You usually just have two, so they've kind of grabbed that third, but it's important to recognize that that third exists because it helps us see education more clearly. Speaking of understanding education more clearly, so in 1926, the British philosopher, logician, just all-around swell guy, Bertrand Russell, wrote a book called On Education, where he identified these three jobs. And he was, because of his own personal history, was post-zealotry. He was post having one firm answer to everything and said, no. In order to have anything, you need to kind of dance between these different perspectives. So what he said that schools need to do is to balance these three different goals, jobs of education. In the story of educational reform in the 20th century has been to try to take take one of these three and then moderate it a little bit with some of the other perspectives. Actually, go ahead and do this. Let's draw a triangle. I'm going to draw a dot down here and a dot up. I'll actually save a bit of space there. A dot right here and a dot right here and a dot right here. I'm kind of happy with this. It's okay if it's not straight. Okay. Down here, we will just draw a big S for socialize. Up here, we'll draw an A for academics. And up here, we will draw a D for development. This is one sad triangle. There are so many, what understanding education is coming from as having these three jobs. And as being an attempt to balance these three jobs allows us to do is make sense of the infinite number of educational philosophies that exist. So here, Montessori classrooms. Feel free to not guess if you don't know Montessori very well. My wife and I used to work at a Montessori-inspired classroom. Where would you put Montessori on our triangle? Between which two, or which one would be closest to? I'll go ahead and just give 10 seconds for that. The goal is socialize, academics, or development. That's interesting. Okay, Okay, I am agreeing with one person. Nope, wait, I'm not. Yes, I'm agreeing with one person here. So this is, here, I'll just turn this off because, oh man, this is so good. I think actually Montessori draws in some very interesting ways I know it draws in many interesting ways from all three of these. I see Montessori as being especially between academics and development because you get to develop yourself by choosing which of the works that you go and do. But all those works are like the proper things for developing, the clearest kind of understanding possible. I'm going to suggest that Montessori is somewhere around, college. Mont for this. But if you disagree with that, you might be more right than I am on this. My wife is a trained Montessori teacher, and that's what she thought also, or especially. But, you can see these things in different ways. Okay, how about a military school? 10 seconds, go. This is not a picture of a military school, by the way. I spent a long time trying to find a good picture of a military academy, like a high school military academy. Couldn't find any. Couldn't find a single one. Then I tried to find the clip from that episode of The Simpsons where they go to a military academy, and it was a really fun episode. Couldn't find a single clip from that. I think we're all agreed on this. So this is a picture of some Army people in a college class. I think that it's clear that military Academy would be there. The interesting thing is the word academy actually might mean that it is closer, that it is somewhat closer to the academy side of that too, right? It's interesting fact that I frankly should have thought about before this. Okay, how about the next one is a unschooling. Is a unschooling. Where would unschooling go in all of this? So we are 100%, I think, agreed on this. Yes, that unschooling is, in some ways, one of the purest types of just aiming for development. Now, I think there are some other ways that you could do that, too. Here's unschooling. Every one of these perspectives has diversity in it. We saw with the academic how that can happen, but even with like socializing, like you can have different societies and have very different sorts of perspectives on like what people should do, right? Based on the different societies and their values. Very, very different. Ancient China was not the same as ancient India, which is not the same as ancient Rome, right? They have very different types of education, but they're all socialization. You can also have different types of developmental education too. Maybe you think that the best thing for kids is they exercise choice, or you think the best thing for kids is that they very closely follow what Jean Piaget thought was the natural unfolding of the human mind, and you just give that. I have a really hard time with Waldorf, so in the interest of time, I'm going to skip that over, but we can kick around that afterwards. And finally, classical education. Where do you see classical as being? I love this book, Adler's How to Read a Book, one of my favorite books. Classical is one of the ways, maybe one of the biggest ways, of trying to capture the academic ideal. And I think, yeah, between S and A is interesting. You can say all these things. It's really interesting, right? And you can be right in different ways by what aspects of the schooling you are focusing on for this. Okay. I don't want to openly critique any of these right now, because it seems rude, since I wouldn't have time to do equal focus on all of these. And I love some of these more than I love other ones of these. And in the past, I feel like when I was younger and I was just on my own trying to figure out like, what is the one true way of schooling, right? How do we make really good education? I binged around between mostly A and D and some places in between, but also some of the S as well. So I have loved all of these. I would say that I even love S in the sense that it can get the job done. If you are at one of these extremes and you are happy, great. If it is working for you, fantastic. This is one of the things that for those of us who here who are homeschoolers, we've homeschooled, we basically written homeschooling into our wedding vows. Before we got engaged, we decided that we were going to be homeschoolers. No, not we. If one of these is working wonderfully for you, great. If you're a homeschooler, you can do what's best for your family, and that can make this a lot easier. The part of this that I'm interested in is that it doesn't, even when you only have like one kid, and you can do whatever you want. So often, in my own family, and in other homeschoolers that I talk to, it doesn't make the problems go away. You'd think that it would. It's really remarkable that it doesn't. If what you're doing right now is working for you, great. Good job. We're like at an hour right now, and I'm not quite done with this. The fun part is about to hit. So if you want to stay afterwards, do. If you want to go right now, you will be getting the link to watch this. The link to watch this, and you can watch the end. I do recommend that you watch the end of this. My apologies if this is taking a bit longer. What I do want to suggest imagine a school that was just academic. Would it work? This has been tried. This was tried for thousands of years, and oh my gosh, it didn't work. Sometimes what makes me irritated by the classical education people. And right, like I'm probably in my bones closest to being a classical education person. I homeschooled myself my junior year of high school, so because I ran across the work of Susan Wise Bauer and felt desperately in love with the idea of a classical education and tried to give one to myself. It turns out that I was lazy, and the next year I ended up returning to school. But that was not the fault of classical education. That was my fault. But I love classical education. I'm helping a friend set up a classical school. Okay, so there's my bona fides. Classical education has been tried for thousands of years en masse. And what it did was make people so disgusted with it that it gave us the developmental approach, that it gave us Rousseau. People's minds did not get transformed with this information. They were just asses loaded with books. Imagine a school that is just purely developmental. It might be impossible to imagine an actual school. So if you want to just imagine total unschooling, I've worked at a school that tried to actually kind of go close to being as pure as possible in the developmental way. And I need to say it was, and so far as I know, is a really wonderful school. You can have wonderful schools, just whatever their philosophies are, just because of who is working there and the care that they are giving. But it was interesting to see how they couldn't just follow the developmental goal. They tried to give the kids all the choices in the world, but look, at the end of the day, their parents wanted the kids to go to college, so they had to take certain classes. The promise of the developmental approach is that when you use these methods, you get these kids who are just on fire for learning, full human beings. And I will say that I saw a lot of kids who were like that, but I also saw a lot of kids who were not like that. I thought, oh my gosh, why is everyone at the school not facing up to, why are we trying to put a happy face on kids that we are not being well served in our program? This is not working the way that we are saying this is working. So this has been, these radical experiments, especially in developmental education and progressivist education, has been tried over the last 100 years. And they mostly explode. Okay, imagine a school that is purely given to the socialization goal. What does it look like? One of the things that Egan says is the Hitler Youth Program. Now, that is obviously a reductio ad Hitlerum, but the problem with it helps us see the problems in this sort of education pursued to its extremes very easily, and that is whatever your surrounding society is, we're just going to say press that into the individual. Now, if you live in a beautiful, flourishing, healthy society, then great. And if you're in a society that everyone in the society agrees, like, yes, our society is the best. This is the way that we have to keep doing this. Great. But if you think that it's a bad society, that you think that we should try to change it or improve it in some way, that's going to make you an enemy of this. So whatever the problems of the society are, that is what we get in a school that is totally sold out to this. Egan actually has a really wonderful, no. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. Yeah, we're going to do it. Sorry, flashing screens. Oh, not flashing screens, because I'm not sharing my screen, just as well, I suppose. Here's what I want to suggest. Maybe the goal then can't be to take one of the extreme sides and just stick with that. Maybe the goal has to be to balance these things and take here, or take here, or take here. Think about where you would want to sit in the balance between these things. But here's my question for you. Not which of those three balances would you be, but would this balance at least be better than choosing one of the extremes? I'm going to launch a poll. That poll has the choices of yes, no, or maybe. You have 10 seconds. Go ahead and answer this yes, no, or maybe for would at least the sides of this be better than the extremes for this? 3, 2, 1, and take a look. We are at 68% yes, 26% maybe, and 5% no. One person saying no to this. Okay, so to this, Kieran Egan suggests 3 ridiculous thought experiments. Okay, so imagine that the global community recognizes that, man, like these wealth disparities that we have, they're just so unfair. You have this generational wealth that's being passed down and people get lucky in what jobs that they get, and that's not fair either. So what they do is they change the way that income is distributed. Every week, you drive over to your local theater and you watch, like some really good film. And after you watch the film, you go out into the lobby and there are these desks set up and you are given a number 2 pencil and a piece of paper and you are made to answer multiple choice questions about the movie that you just saw, right? Like, the aliens, what planet are they on? It's Pandora. Okay, like what is the thing that the scientists are trying to get? They're trying to get the unobtainium. What is the major conflict between the 2 characters? Who was the second gaffer of the movie, right? Maybe there are essays that you can write. This is an attempt to imagine the blend between the academics, this is our movie watching scenario, and socialization. We know that society needs to have, like these certain kind of goals or whatever. Like it has to fit these people into certain slots. So based then on in this scenario, based on how you answer those questions, how many you get right, your income for the next week is raised or lowered, depending on that. And the next week you go back and watch another film. And this is how you figure out, we figure out as a society who gets what jobs and how much money people get. How successful is that at making a great society? I think we can agree that that would be stupid. How successful is this at getting people to really appreciate the beauty of film? I think we can agree that that would be horrendous. It would ruin both of those goals. Egan's idea is that trying to compromise between those 2 gives you the worst of all possible worlds. Okay, so let's say that, let's take the one between academics and development. Okay, so let's say that your government decides that it's stupid that we just have these one kind of schools that everybody should go into because people are different kinds of learners. And so what it does, it says we are going to actually make 100 different kinds of school, and we are going to make them available to absolutely every community. You can imagine really fast trains, you can imagine the internet, whatever. These different kinds of schools that people can, take these tests and we'll figure out, like, are you a out-of-the-box learner or an in-the-box learner? Are you left-brained or are you right-brained? Are you emotional or logical? Are you visual or a kinesthetic learner? Or auditory? Do you have red hair? Do you have brown hair? Do you have no hair? Right? Whatever it is, right? We have found the exact right way for you to learn. And what do you learn at all of these different schools? Any of these different schools? The answer is, of course, exactly the same thing. Do you see why? If what they're trying to do is bridge these 2 goals of the developmental, so everybody breaks apart and learns all of they become themselves, their own quirky, unique selves, and we understand how kids learn, but we're trying to bridge that with the academic goals. So, they're learning calculus, they're learning, like whatever the best kind of literature is. That idea is ridiculous. It makes no sense. You'd think that, academics tell you how to learn, and developmental goals the developmental approach tells you, how to learn it. But when you really take this seriously, you recognize that, no, it doesn't make sense that everybody should be learning exactly the same thing. That's stupid from this perspective. The idea that everybody should learn different things is stupid from this perspective. These things don't make any sense together. They do not mix together. Trying to combine them can only make them worse. Okay, so then finally imagine a compromise position between the socialization and the developmental goals. Okay, so I want you to imagine that you are, I turned 40 recently, and I'll tell you, on my 40th birthday, I just felt like, what am I doing with my life? Surely there must have been some other road I could have taken besides taking on this hellacious job of being an online science instructor. I just hate every day of my life. I love my job. I love my job. I love my business. I can't do this anymore. And so I went to my local state government approved organization called the Realize the Real You, RETRY, retry. And I then get to meet with a counselor, and that counselor really works to understand exactly who I am, exactly what I am meant for in this world, exactly what motivates me, what makes me, where I get my purpose from. And then she is rewarded, she gets advanced or demoted based on how well I go back into my earlier job and become a good cog of society. You're like, wait, what? Do you see the problem between trying to combine the developmental and the socialize? The developmental, again, says, right, go and become your own quirky self. Socialize says, fit into this box. Realize the real you. These are Egan's 3 thought experiments, just to show in a ridiculous way, mostly not even having to do with schools, how attempts to smoosh these together, they don't make sense. They can't work. Okay, so then maybe you're thinking the middle. It has to be the middle, right? It was an interesting thing. I went recently and I looked at a couple of places that I've lived to see what the the mission statement was of these schools. So I come from this obscure town in Wisconsin called Muskego. Every student learning, growing, succeeding to life each and every day. This is bad writing, by the way. A learning environment that I edited it to make it better. A learning environment that personalizes, nurtures, and holds students to rigorous expectations. That's interesting, isn't it? Do you see what's going on here? You see the personalizes, that's so developmental, nurtures, that's so developmental, and holds students to rigorous expectations. How easily do those two things go along with each other? Okay, so that's just 2, right? Although maybe succeeding to life. Is that even a phrase, by the way? Does anyone ever said that? I don't think that even is strictly speaking grammatical. I had a good time in these schools. I just got to say, I'm trying to bully on them. Maybe you can see the socialization aspect there, but maybe not. Maybe I'm making that up. Okay. So then I looked at Rochester, the city that I currently live in, Rochester, Minnesota. Inspire, challenge, and empower all students with the knowledge and skills required to reach their full potential to contribute to future generations. I love that part. And to become involved members of a global community. Okay, which of the 3 goals do you see here? I see the knowledge and skills to become members of a global community. That's straight up socialization. Good citizenship, good global citizenship. That's socialization. To reach their full potential, that's developmental. I'm not sure, there seems to maybe be sort of an assumed academic push in here. I'm not sure what contribute to future generations is. Maybe socialize, I don't know, it's mostly poetry, but I like the poetry, it's good poetry. And then I looked at Seattle. I moved here from Seattle. Ensure that each student will graduate ready for college, career. Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to say Seattle. For college, career, and life. Do you see it? Academic, socialize, developmental. Here's the thing. It seems like the most natural thing in the world to say, oh, we should just try to combine these. We should try to find the perfect balance between all of these things. The trouble is, that can't work. I'll just say, now. The schools that we have are results of trying to pursue these 3 different goals. These 3 different goals undercut each other. They sabotage each other. The more you pursue one, the more it ruins your attempt to pursue the others. This is Egan's answer to why school sucks for so many kids. Why is good education so hard? We give schools, go for it. We give schools 3 jobs. I should have come back here earlier. Anybody want to try? This suddenly feels very much like Wheel of Fortune. Alone. Nice one. They're terrible. But together, they're exactly worse. So the question for us is, how can we fix this? We've had 100 years of trying to move closer or farther away from various of those goals. I do, of course, have to say that it's not all as simple as this. You can have diversity inside of these goals. So it's not just where you move, but it's how you conceive of those goals. There are maybe other goals. But if there are, it probably doesn't make the situation better, does it? How do we fix education? How do we conceive of schools that actually do a wonderful job for most kids at helping them get good educations? Egan's argument is that using the methods that we have right now, not the methods, no, using this model of education, these ideas of education, these 3 jobs of education, we can't. It is hopeless. We are doomed. The only potential way out of this is to start over and reconceive of what education means with a new job for schools. We're not going to do that today because we're already over, and I knew that. By the way, originally this was going to be 1 workshop, and I was going to try to do this last part we just did, and then all of Egan's idea. And then I thought maybe it should be 2, and then I gave like a workshop version of this to test it out, and I thought, oh, no, shouldn't be 2, it should be 5 or 6. So we're going to make this 5. What we are going to do in the next week, Saturday, is to talk about how Egan answers this question for kids who are young. I'm just going to take 3 to 8. I'm going to call it elementary school just because we can talk about that's a little handle we can hang on it. The background picture here is very interesting and might be relevant for what we were talking about. Then the next week we're going to talk about, we're just going to call it middle school and what his vision is for that. Then we're going to talk about high school. I will say that even if you don't agree that this is the problem, this thing that we set out today, Egan's vision for education is one that makes almost everyone that I've ever talked to excited. The difficulty is explaining why he thinks it works, but when you see what this idea, this one beautiful idea gets us in all 3 of these ages and more beside, I will be surprised if you are not desperately in love with what he is suggesting. It is a way, he promises this and he succeeds at this, of actually helping us get the things that we love from socialization and from academics and from developmental, at least a lot of those things, without actually trying to pursue any of those 3 things. This is just a bad way of cutting up kind of the question. When we reconceive of it differently, and then finally, we're going to zoom out, talk about, well, I won't say right now, even the bigger picture, and say, how can we help our kids really understand the whole world? This is where we're going to come back and actually talk about the theoretical perspective on this. We'll be kind of dropping some hints about that there. Would you like some hints for where we're going with this? I'll give you two. Hint number one, a kid pointing to a map being watched by a man in Russia. And clue number two is the most ridiculed idea in all of biology. Egan's going to take two ridiculous seeming ideas, knit them together, and give us something wonderful. If you are interested in just doing this on your own, I recommend the book, The Future of Education, which is his most concise version of this and may cause you to fall in love with this. This chapter 2 from the book is basically what we've just been talking about. However, what I will also be doing for you, for everyone who signed up for just today's workshop and for those of you who signed up for all of the workshops, in order to research this to make sure that I was really accurately stating what Egan believed, I went back and I reread his book, The Educated Mind. I reread it, and then I went through every paragraph in 5 different chapters, and I underlined the key sentence in every paragraph. And then I went into the margin and I wrote down in just like really easy language what that one sentence was, but like summarizing it. And then what I went and did was, do I have this in here? What I did was Genius Workshops, Egan, yeah, here we go. What I have done is I've taken those summaries and I will share them with you. Every sentence in this document represents one paragraph from his book, The Educated Mind, which is probably his most theoretical, high-level book. Hard to read in many ways. Much better to read The Future of Education if you're getting started. But I'll give you this. I'll send this to you, to everyone who's here right now or watching this actually just this evening. But this will go through everything that we've just talked about so you can hit it again and understand it more directly. This is not a perfect summary, but it's a pretty good one. If you are interested, if you want to sort of understand, to get a taste of how Egan's ideas can work for kids, the next 3 Sundays, I am teaching some of our science bites. I teach these every once in a while. The one that is tomorrow, Sunday, I forget what time. It's in the afternoon. It's on the website. It's, I think, $5 or $10 right now. We call them science bites. They're just an hour long. They usually are an hour long, and they don't go over like this. It's Why is Fruit Sweet? As part of this, we will do what we've been doing here, except it'll be way more interactive. We have kids having their cameras on, and we'll be having them play this game with their hands where they go even more quickly. The week after that, we will be doing one about why is bread delicious, and then one about why don't dogs lay eggs. Each of these is kind of a cooking class. No, it is a cooking class, but it is also a food science class, kind of an evolutionary biology class in particular. We have a really fun time with this. And I suppose that's actually all that I have. I will stick around for a few extra minutes and I'll answer any questions that anybody would like to ask. Feel free to throw that into the chat or hit the hand raise button on Zoom and I'll try to let you talk. Thank you tremendously much for coming. If you were interested, most important thing, in the rest of these, go to grab a seat on sciencesweird.com. Hit Genius Workshops, it'll scroll you to the bottom here, and then just hit Education's biggest idea, all 5 workshops, and you'll get the links to each of the additional workshops if you have not already done that. Thank you tremendously much for coming. Happy educating.